Mary Collins held her son Danny close to her chest as she walked through the dusty streets of New Haven. The boy was only 6 years old, but he felt too light in her arms. His face was pale and his eyes looked tired. Mary knew why. They had not eaten proper food in 3 days. The alien ships had landed on their planet 2 years ago. The blue-skinned creatures called themselves Zephyrians. They were tall and had 4 eyes that glowed yellow in the dark. Their skin looked like leather, and they had long fingers with sharp nails. When they first came, they said they wanted to help humans. They lied. Now the Zephyrians controlled everything. They owned all the food stores. They owned all the water. They owned all the houses. Humans had to ask permission for everything. If a human wanted food, they needed a permit. If they wanted water, they needed a permit. If they wanted to move from one place to another, they needed a permit. Mary's husband Ben had worked in the mining tunnels. The Zephyrians made humans dig deep holes in the ground to find special rocks. Ben worked hard every day. He came home tired and dirty, but he always brought food rations for his family. 3 months ago, there was an accident in the mines. A tunnel collapsed. Ben never came home. After Ben died, the Zephyrians cut Mary's food rations in half. They said she was not a worker anymore. She was just a mouth to feed. Mary tried to find work, but the aliens only gave jobs to strong men. Women and children were not useful to them. Danny had been sick for a week. He coughed all night and could barely stand up. Mary knew he needed food and medicine. She had sold everything valuable in their small house. She had traded her wedding ring for 1 meal. She had nothing left to give. The marketplace was full of Zephyrian merchants. They sold fresh bread, meat, and vegetables behind glass cases. The smell of food made Mary's stomach hurt with hunger. Human children pressed their faces against the glass windows and stared at the food they could not have. Mary approached a Zephyrian merchant who was arranging loaves of bread on a shelf. The alien was wearing fine clothes and had golden rings. On his fingers, his 4 eyes looked down at Mary with disgust. "Please, sir," Mary said in a quiet voice. "My son is very sick. I need just 1 piece of bread. I will pay you back when I find work." The merchant made a sound that was like laughing but meaner. "Humans do not eat without permits. You know the law." "Please," Mary begged. "Look at my child. He is dying." She held Danny up so the merchant could see his thin face and hollow cheeks. The boy's eyes were closed and his breathing was weak. The merchant looked at Danny for a moment. Then he turned back to his bread. "Not my problem. Go away before I call the enforcers." Mary moved to the next merchant. This one sold vegetables and fruits that looked fresh and colorful. "Please help us," she said. "My son needs food. I will do any work you want." The second merchant was even ruder than the first. "Stupid human. Learn your place. We do not give charity to your kind." Mary went to a third merchant, then a fourth, then a fifth. Each one said no. Some laughed at her. Others threatened to have her arrested. One merchant threw a rock at her and told her to get away from his store. By now, other humans in the marketplace were watching Mary. They looked sad, but nobody helped her. They were all afraid of the Zephyrians. Anyone who broke the law would be punished. Anyone who helped someone break the law would also be punished. Mary felt desperate. Danny was getting weaker in her arms. His skin felt hot with fever. She could not let her son die. She could not give up. She went back to the first merchant. This time she fell to her knees in front of his store. "I am begging you," she said with tears in her eyes. "Please give my child some food. He is innocent. He has done nothing wrong." The merchant stepped back as if Mary was something dirty. "Get away from my store," he shouted. "You are making my customers uncomfortable." But Mary did not move. She stayed on her knees and kept begging. "Please have mercy. I will do anything. I will clean your store. I will carry your boxes. Just give my son a piece of bread." The merchant's 4 eyes glowed brighter with anger. He reached for a communication device on his belt. "Security," he said into the device. "I have a human causing trouble at my store. Send enforcers immediately." Within minutes, 3 Zephyrian enforcers arrived at the marketplace. They were bigger than the merchants and wore black uniforms. They carried weapons that crackled with blue electricity. Their faces showed no emotion as they looked down at Mary. "This human is begging without a permit," the merchant told them. "She refuses to leave my store." The lead enforcer was a tall Zephyrian with scars on his face. His name was Captain Veltar, and he was known for being cruel to humans. "Stand up," he ordered Mary. Mary struggled to her feet while still holding Danny. The boy was barely conscious now. "Please, sir," she said to the captain. "I just need food for my child." Captain Veltar looked at Danny with cold eyes. "Human children are weak. If this one dies, you can make another one." The cruel words hit Mary like a punch to the stomach. She stared at the captain in shock. How could anyone be so heartless about a sick child? "You have broken the law," Captain Veltar continued. "Begging without a permit is a crime. You will be punished as an example to other humans." "What punishment?" Mary asked, though she was afraid to hear the answer. Captain Veltar smiled, but it was not a kind smile. "Public whipping in the town square. All humans will watch and learn what happens when they forget their place in our society." The other enforcers grabbed Mary's arms. One of them tried to take Danny away from her, but she held him tighter. "No," she cried. "Please do not hurt my son." "The child will watch," Captain Veltar said. "He will learn an important lesson about respecting Zephyrian law." As the enforcers dragged Mary toward the town square, she could hear the merchant behind them laughing with satisfaction. The town square of New Haven was made of gray stone that felt cold even under the afternoon sun. In the center stood a tall wooden post with metal rings attached to it. This was where the Zephyrians brought humans who broke their laws. Mary had seen other people tied to this post before. She had always looked away because watching the punishment was too painful. Now it was her turn. Captain Veltar pushed Mary toward the whipping post while two other enforcers held her arms. Her son Danny hung limp in her embrace, too weak to understand what was happening. The boy's breathing was shallow and his skin felt burning hot with fever. "Attention, humans," Captain Veltar shouted across the square. His voice was loud and harsh. "Come witness what happens to those who forget their place." People began gathering around the square. Most were humans who lived in the town, but Mary could also see some Zephyrian merchants and officials. The aliens stood apart from the humans and watched with interest like people watching a show for entertainment. Mary recognized many faces in the crowd. There was Lisa Brown, who worked at the water treatment plant. She had 2 young children of her own. There was old Pete Martinez, who fixed broken machines for the Zephyrians. There was Janet Smith, who cleaned the alien government buildings. All of them looked at Mary with sad eyes, but none of them moved to help her. "This human violated our laws," Captain Veltar announced to the crowd. "She begged for food without a proper permit. She disturbed our merchants and refused to obey orders. She must be punished so others will learn." 2 enforcers pulled Danny away from Mary's arms. The boy was too sick to resist, but he made a small crying sound as they separated him from his mother. They handed him to Lisa Brown, who held him gently and whispered comforting words in his ear. "No," Mary cried as they took her son. "Please let me hold him. He is afraid." "Silence," Captain Veltar ordered. "You should have thought about your child before you broke our laws." The enforcers forced Mary's arms above her head and tied her wrists to the metal rings on the post. The rope was rough and cut into her skin. Her back was exposed to the crowd and to the weapons that would soon hurt her. Captain Veltar walked to a case that sat on a table near the post. Inside the case was a weapon that humans called an energy whip. It looked like a handle with a cord, made of blue light instead of leather. When the weapon hit someone, it caused terrible pain, but did not leave permanent marks. The Zephyrians designed it this way so they could punish humans over and over without making them unable to work. 15 lashes, Captain Veltar announced. "This is the penalty for begging without a permit." Mary closed her eyes and tried to prepare herself for the pain. She thought about her husband Ben and wished he was here to protect her and Danny. She thought about her son and hoped he would recover from his sickness. She tried not to think about how much the whip would hurt. The first lash came without warning. The energy whip hit Mary's back with a sound like thunder. Pain shot through her body like fire. She bit her lip to keep from screaming, but a small cry escaped her throat. 1, Captain Veltar counted. In the crowd, Danny tried to reach for his mother, but Lisa held him back. The boy was too weak to struggle much, but tears ran down his pale cheeks. "Mama," he whispered in a voice so quiet only Lisa could hear. The second lash hit Mary lower on her back. This time she could not hold back her scream. The pain was worse than anything she had ever felt. It was like being struck by lightning and burned by fire at the same time. 2, the captain counted with satisfaction in his voice. Some humans in the crowd looked away. Others watched with angry faces but did nothing. They all knew that anyone who interfered would face the same punishment or worse. The Zephyrians had made it clear that humans who helped criminals would be treated as criminals themselves. The third lash made Mary's knees buckle. She hung from the ropes that tied her wrists to the post. Her back felt like it was on fire. Sweat, mixed with tears, ran down her face. 3, Pete Martinez, the old mechanic, stepped forward from the crowd. "Captain, this woman has a sick child," he said in a respectful voice. "Maybe you could show mercy." Captain Veltar turned his 4 glowing eyes toward Pete. "Are you questioning my judgment, human?" Pete quickly stepped back. "No, sir. I apologize." "Sir?" "Good. Anyone else who speaks out of turn will receive 10 lashes of their own." The 4th lash hit Mary across her shoulder blades. She screamed again and her body shook with pain. Blood began to seep through her torn shirt where the energy weapon had burned her skin. 4. Danny tried again to break free from Lisa's arms. "Stop hurting my mama," he cried in his weak voice. "She did not do anything bad." Captain Veltar heard the boy's words and smiled coldly. "Your mother is a criminal, child. She broke our laws and must be punished. Watch carefully so you do not make the same mistakes." The 5th lash struck Mary's lower back. The pain was so intense that she nearly passed out. She could taste blood in her mouth from biting her tongue. 5. The crowd watched in horrible silence. Some of the Zephyrian observers seemed bored, as if they had seen this many times before. Others appeared to enjoy watching the humans suffer. A few alien children pointed at Mary and laughed. The 6th lash made Mary vomit. She hung limply from the post, barely conscious. Her back was covered in burns and cuts from the energy whip. 6. Janet Smith began to cry as she watched. She had children too and could imagine how she would feel in Mary's place. But she did not dare speak up after seeing what happened to Pete. The 7th lash hit Mary's shoulder. She no longer had the strength to scream. Only a low moan came from her throat. 7. In the crowd, Lisa Brown held Danny closer to her chest. The boy was barely awake, but he kept trying to look at his mother. Lisa turned his face away so he could not see the terrible things happening to Mary. The 8th lash struck Mary's upper back. Her body convulsed with pain, but she made no sound. She had reached the limit of what she could endure. 8. Captain Veltar raised the energy whip for the 9th strike. The weapon crackled with blue electricity as he prepared to bring it down on Mary's torn and bleeding back. The crowd held its breath, waiting for the next lash to fall. But before the captain could strike, something unusual happened. A deep voice came from the back of the crowd, speaking words that no one expected to hear. "That is enough." The crowd turned to see who had spoken. From the back of the square, a man walked forward with slow, steady steps. He was enormous, standing nearly 7 feet tall with shoulders as wide as a door. His hair was long and dark, tied back with a leather cord. His beard was thick and reached down to his chest. His skin was brown from years under the sun and marked with old scars. The man wore clothes made from animal hide and leather that he had crafted himself. A large knife hung from his belt alongside other tools and weapons that looked handmade. His boots were worn but sturdy, made for walking long distances over rough ground. But what struck people most about him were his eyes. They were dark blue and cold as winter ice, and they had seen too much death and hardship. "Jake Morrison," someone whispered in the crowd. People had heard stories about the mountain man, but most thought he was dead. When the Zephyrians invaded, Jake had disappeared into the wilderness beyond the town. Some said aliens had killed him. Others believed he had run away in fear. Now here he was, walking calmly toward the whipping post like he owned the place. Captain Veltar lowered his energy. Whippen stared at the approaching human. Something about Jake Morrison made the alien feel uneasy. This man did not walk like other humans. He did not keep his eyes down or show fear. He moved like a predator who had never been prey. "You will stop where you are, human," Captain Veltar ordered. "This is official Zephyrian business." Jake kept walking. His footsteps echoed off the stone ground of the square. He did not look at the captain. Instead, his eyes were fixed on Mary Collins, who hung unconscious from the whipping post. Blood soaked through her torn clothing and her back was covered with burns. "I said stop," Captain Veltar repeated, raising his energy whip. Jake finally looked at the Zephyrian captain. When their eyes met, Captain Veltar felt something he had not experienced in years. Fear. This human's gaze was like looking at a wolf that had been cornered too many times and no longer felt cornered by anything. "I heard you," Jake said in a voice that was quiet but carried clearly across the square. "I chose to ignore you." The crowd gasped at Jake's words. No human had ever spoken to a Zephyrian that way. Even Pete Martinez, who had only asked for mercy, had been threatened with punishment. But Jake Morrison talked to Captain Veltar like the alien was just another man, not a superior being. Jake reached the whipping post and pulled out his large knife. The blade was made from alien metal that he had salvaged and reforged. It was sharp enough to cut through steel and long enough to reach a man's heart from a distance. "Step away from that post," Captain Veltar ordered. "You are interfering with justice." Justice. Jake looked at Mary's unconscious form, then at little Danny, who was crying weakly in Lisa Brown's arms. "You call this justice? Whipping a woman for trying to feed her dying child?" Jake cut the ropes that held Mary's wrists. She collapsed, but he caught her before she hit the ground. He lifted her as easily as if she weighed nothing and carried her away from the post. Blood from her wounds stained his leather shirt, but he did not seem to care. "That woman is a criminal," Captain Veltar said. "She begged without a permit. She disturbed our merchants. She refused to obey lawful orders." Jake gently laid Mary on the ground near where Lisa Brown held Danny. The boy reached out a weak hand toward his mother. Jake knelt down and let Danny touch Mary's face to make sure she was still alive. "Your laws," Jake said as he stood up again. "Not ours. We never agreed to follow them." Captain Veltar laughed, but it sounded forced. "You have no choice, human. We conquered your world. We make the rules now." "You conquered a town," Jake corrected. "You conquered some farms and mines. You conquered people who were not ready to fight. But you never conquered the mountains. You never conquered the wilderness. And you sure as hell never conquered me." The other Zephyrian enforcers moved closer to their captain. They sensed that this situation was becoming dangerous. One of them spoke into his communication device, calling for backup from the garrison. Jake noticed the movement but did not seem concerned. He looked around the square at all the faces watching him. Humans and aliens alike stared at this man who dared to challenge Zephyrian authority. "Look at yourselves," Jake said to the human crowd. "Look what you have become. You beg for scraps from creatures who see you as animals. You watch them torture a mother for trying to save her child and you do nothing. When did you forget that you are human beings?" Some people in the crowd looked ashamed. Others looked angry, but not at Jake. They looked angry at themselves for being too afraid to act. "We survive," Lisa Brown said quietly. "That is all we can do." "Survival is not the same as living," Jake replied. "A dog survives by eating scraps and obeying its master. Are you dogs or are you people?" Captain Veltar had heard enough. "Silence," he shouted. "You will submit to arrest immediately or face the consequences." Jake turned back to face the Zephyrian. "Captain, what consequences would those be?" "Death," Captain Veltar said simply. "I will execute you here in front of everyone." Jake smiled for the first time since entering the square. It was not a pleasant smile. "You can try." The crowd moved back, sensing that violence was about to begin. Children were pulled behind their parents. Old people backed toward the edges of the square. Even some of the Zephyrian merchants retreated to what they thought was a safe distance. "You are one human against an entire garrison," Captain Veltar said. "Even if you defeat me, which is impossible, my soldiers will kill you." "Maybe," Jake agreed, "but first I would kill you. And your death would show every human in this square that you can bleed just like any other creature. Sometimes that is worth dying for." Captain Veltar felt sweat forming on his alien skin despite the cool air. This human was either completely insane or completely fearless. Either way, he was dangerous. "I offer you single combat," Jake said loudly so everyone could hear. "You against me. No weapons except what we carry. If I win, the woman goes free and her child gets medical treatment. If you win, you can execute me in whatever way pleases you most." "This is ridiculous," Captain Veltar said. "I do not need to prove anything to a primitive human." "Then you are a coward," Jake said simply. The words hit Captain Veltar like a physical blow. In Zephyrian culture, being called a coward was the worst possible insult. No Zephyrian could ignore such a challenge without losing all respect from his people. "Captain," Veltar looked around at the other aliens in the square. He could see doubt in their eyes. If he refused to fight this human, they would question his courage forever. "Very well," Captain Veltar said finally. "I accept your challenge. When I defeat you, I will make your death slow and painful." Jake nodded and began removing his weapons and tools. He set aside his knife, his bow, and several items that the Zephyrians did not recognize. When he was finished, he stood in the center of the square wearing only his leather clothing. Captain Veltar also removed his equipment, but he kept his energy whip and his personal shield generator. These were considered part of a Zephyrian warrior's natural fighting ability, not separate weapons. The two fighters faced each other in the empty space around the whipping post. One was an alien with advanced technology and years of military training. The other was a human who had learned to survive in the wilderness using nothing but his intelligence and will to live. The fight that would change everything was about to begin. Jake Morrison stood in the center of the town square and looked around at the faces watching him. Humans pressed together at the edges of the space, their eyes wide with fear and hope. Zephyrian merchants and officials formed their own group, confident that their captain would quickly defeat this primitive human. "Before we begin," Jake said in a voice that carried across the entire square, "I want all of you to remember something important." Captain Veltar activated his personal shield generator. Blue energy surrounded his body like a second skin. The shield would stop most physical attacks and reduce the damage from anything that got through. "Speak quickly, human. I grow tired of your voice." Jake ignored the captain and continued speaking to the crowd. "You think humans are weak because we do not have energy weapons or flying ships or force fields. You think we are stupid because we use simple tools made from metal and wood. You have forgotten what makes humans special." He pointed to the whipping post where Mary Collins had been tortured. "That woman was willing to risk everything for her child. She knew she would be punished, but she tried anyway because a mother's love is stronger than fear." Some of the humans in the crowd straightened their shoulders. They had been bowing their heads for so long that they had forgotten how to stand tall. "You have forgotten that humans survived the Ice Age with nothing but fire and fur clothing," Jake continued. "We crossed oceans in wooden boats when we did not know what was on the other side. We climbed the highest mountains and explored the deepest caves. We walked on our own moon before we even learned to build computers that fit in our pockets." Captain Veltar raised his energy whip. "Enough speeches. Your primitive history means nothing now." Jake smiled again, and this time there was something dangerous in his expression. "Our history means everything. It shows that humans do not give up. We do not bow down. We do not accept defeat even when defeat seems certain." He began walking in a slow circle around the captain, his movements smooth and controlled. "Every species you have conquered before was comfortable and soft. They had easy lives with machines that did everything for them. When you attacked, they did not know how to fight back." Captain Veltar turned to keep Jake in sight, his four eyes tracking the human's movement. "And you think you are different?" "I know I am different," Jake said. "I have spent 2 years in the mountains learning how to survive with nothing. I have hunted animals that could kill me with one swipe of their claws. I have walked through blizzards that would freeze alien blood in alien veins. I have eaten roots and insects when there was nothing else to eat. I have become what humans were before we built cities and forgot how to be dangerous. The circle Jake was walking grew smaller. He was moving closer to the captain with each step, but so slowly that it was hard to notice. You want to know what makes humans special? Jake asked. We are the only species that gets more dangerous when you try to break us. Push us down and we get back up stronger. Take away our weapons and we make new ones. Take away our homes and we build better ones. Take away our hope and we create hope from nothing. Old Pete Martinez stepped forward from the crowd. My grandfather used to tell stories about the old days, he said in a shaky voice. Before the aliens came. He said humans once fought wars that lasted for years and never gave up. Silence. Captain Veltar snapped at Pete, but other humans were starting to speak up too. My mother survived a plague that killed half her city, Lisa Brown said while still holding Danny Collins. She worked in hospitals even when she knew she might die. My father was a soldier, another voice called out. He said humans were the best fighters in the galaxy because they never knew when to quit. Captain Veltar realized that something was changing in the crowd. The humans were no longer looking at the ground. They were standing straighter and speaking louder. This mountain man was somehow making them remember things they had forgotten. That is exactly what I'm talking about, Jake said. You have been slaves for 2 years, but you are still human. You still have that fire inside you. You just need someone to remind you how to use it. Jake stopped circling and faced Captain Veltar directly. Your people made a mistake when they attacked Earth. You thought you were conquering farmers and shopkeepers. You did not realize you were attacking the descendants of warriors and explorers and survivors. Captain Veltar laughed, though it sounded less confident than before. Big words from a man who is about to die. Maybe I will die today, Jake agreed. But if I do, it will not be because I gave up. It will not be because I begged for mercy. It will be because I chose to fight for something more important than my own life. He gestured toward Mary Collins, who was starting to wake up from her beating. That woman fought for her child. I am fighting for all of you. I am fighting to show you that aliens can bleed, and aliens can be beaten, and aliens can be afraid. Jake pulled something small from his pocket. It looked like a piece of metal with wires attached to it. The crowd could not tell what it was, but Captain Veltar's eyes widened when he saw it. Where did you get that? The captain demanded. I made it, Jake said simply. From pieces of your own technology. Did you think I spent 2 years in the mountains hiding under rocks? I have been studying your weapons and your ships and your computers. I have been learning how they work and how to break them. He held up the small device so everyone could see it. This little thing can overload a Zephyrian shield generator. It took me 6 months to figure out how to build it. Captain. Veltar stepped back, suddenly less confident. That is impossible. Humans do not understand our technology. You keep underestimating us, Jake said. That is going to be your downfall. Jake pressed a button on the device. Captain Veltar's shield flickered and sparked, then disappeared. Completely. The captain looked down at his shield generator in shock. The device was smoking and making strange noises. How? Captain Veltar whispered. Humans are very good at figuring out how things work, Jake explained. We take things apart and put them back together. We experiment until we understand. We adapt and overcome. It is what we do. The crowd watched in amazement as Jake tossed the small device aside. He had just disabled advanced alien technology, using something he built himself from scraps. Now, we fight on equal terms, Jake said. No shields, no special advantages, just you and me. Captain Veltar still had his energy whip, but without his shield he was much more vulnerable. He raised the weapon and activated it. Blue electricity crackled along its length. I will still destroy you, human, the captain snarled. Technology is not everything. No, Jake agreed. It is not. But you have been depending on technology for so long that you have forgotten how to really fight. I never forgot. The two combatants faced each other in the center of the square. Around them, Humans and aliens watched with growing tension. This was more than just a fight between two individuals. It was a battle between two ways of thinking, two ways of living, two different ideas about what made someone strong. Captain Veltar swung his energy whip in a wide arc, trying to catch Jake across the chest. But the mountain man was no longer where the whip struck. He had moved aside at the last second faster than the captain expected. Jake grabbed a handful of dirt from the ground and threw it at Captain Veltar's face. The alien stumbled backward, trying to clear dust from his 4 eyes. "First lesson in real fighting," Jake said. "Use everything around you as a weapon." The battle had begun, and already it was not going the way Captain Veltar had expected. Captain Veltar wiped the dirt from his eyes and swung his energy whip again. This time he aimed lower, trying to wrap the electric cord around Jake's legs. But Jake jumped over the whip and rolled to the side, coming up near the stone base of the whipping post. "You fight like a coward," Captain Veltar snarled. "Stand still and face me." "You fight like someone who has never had to hunt for his dinner," Jake replied. He grabbed a loose stone from the ground and threw it hard at the captain's head. Captain Veltar ducked, but the stone clipped his shoulder. The alien was fast, but not as fast as the mountain animals Jake had been fighting for 2 years. Bears and wolves had taught Jake lessons that no military academy could provide. The energy whip cracked through the air again. This time it caught Jake across the arm, burning through his leather shirt and leaving a red mark on his skin. Jake grunted with pain but did not slow down. He had been hurt worse by wild animals and kept fighting. "First blood to me," Captain Veltar said with satisfaction. Jake looked at the burn on his arm and smiled. "In the mountains, if you bleed and your enemy does not, it means you are not trying hard enough." Jake suddenly charged straight at Captain Veltar. The alien raised his whip to strike, but Jake dropped and slid across the stone ground, going right between the captain's legs. As he passed underneath, Jake grabbed the captain's ankle and twisted hard. Captain Veltar fell backward with a crash that shook the ground. His energy whip flew from his hand and skittered across the stone. Jake rolled away and came up holding a second device he had pulled from his pocket. "What is that?" Captain Veltar demanded as he struggled to get back on his feet. "Electromagnetic pulse generator," Jake said. "Another toy I built from your technology." He activated the device. There was no sound or flash of light, but suddenly the energy whip stopped crackling. The blue electricity faded and died. Captain Veltar pressed the activation button repeatedly, but nothing happened. "Impossible," the captain whispered. "You cannot understand our energy systems. I had a lot of time to study the weapons your people dropped when they died," Jake said casually. The crowd gasped. Captain Veltar stared at Jake in shock. "When they died? What are you talking about?" "Did you think I was alone in the mountains?" Jake asked. "Your people sent patrols to hunt for me. Squads of 5 or 6 soldiers with energy weapons and flying vehicles. I killed them all." Jake began walking slowly toward the now weaponless captain. "The first group was easy because they made too much noise. I heard them coming from miles away. I picked them off one by one with arrows and traps." "Captain." Veltar backed away, looking around for another weapon, but he had removed all his equipment for the fair fight. "You are lying. Our soldiers are the best trained in the galaxy." "Trained to fight other soldiers, maybe," Jake said. "Not trained to fight ghosts who know every rock and tree for 100 miles. Your second patrol lasted 3 days before I finished them. The third patrol never even found my camp before they all died." Jake pulled out his hunting knife again. The blade was dark with stains that might have been rust or might have been something else. "I learned a lot from your dead soldiers. How your weapons work, how your armor can be penetrated, how long it takes you to die when cut in the right places." Terror was beginning to show in Captain Veltar's 4 eyes. This human was not just a primitive savage. He was a killer who had been studying Zephyrian weaknesses for years. "You want to know the most important thing I learned?" Jake continued. "Zephyrians are not as tough as they pretend to be. Take away your technology and you are just big, slow targets." Captain Veltar tried to run, but Jake was faster. The mountain man tackled the alien captain and they both crashed to the ground. They rolled across the stone, fighting hand to hand. "Captain," Veltar was taller and had longer reach, but Jake was stronger and more experienced at close combat. The alien tried to grab Jake's throat, but the human twisted away and drove his elbow into the captain's ribs. The sound of breaking bones echoed across the square. Captain Veltar screamed in pain and tried to pull away, but Jake held on tight. He wrapped his arm around the captain's neck and began applying pressure. "This is called a chokehold," Jake said in a calm voice as if he was teaching a class. "Cut off blood flow to the brain and your enemy goes to sleep. Keep applying pressure, and they never wake up." Captain Veltar clawed at Jake's arm with his sharp nails drawing lines of blood. But Jake had been marked by bear claws and wolf teeth. Alien fingernails were nothing compared to what he had survived in the wilderness. The captain's struggles grew weaker. His four eyes began to dim as his brain was starved of oxygen. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the mighty Zephyrian warrior was slowly defeated by a human using nothing but his bare hands. "Please," Captain Veltar gasped. "Mercy." Jake looked down at the alien who had been whipping Mary Collins for trying to feed her dying child. "Did you show mercy to that woman? Did you show mercy to the miners who died in your tunnels? Did you show mercy to any humans since you arrived on our world?" Captain Veltar could not answer. He was barely conscious. Jake released the chokehold and let the captain fall to the ground. Captain Veltar lay still, breathing but unconscious. Jake stood up and looked around at the crowd of watching faces. "He is alive," Jake announced. "I could have killed him, but I am not like him. Humans do not murder helpless enemies." The other Zephyrian enforcers who had been waiting at the edge of the square started moving forward. They raised their weapons and aimed at Jake. "Stop," Jake called out to them. "Your captain accepted single combat under your own honor laws. The fight is over and I won. If you shoot me now, you are cowards who cannot accept defeat." The enforcers hesitated. In Zephyrian culture, interfering with the results of honorable combat was considered shameful, but they had never seen one of their captains defeated by a primitive human. Jake walked over to where Mary Collins was sitting up with her son Danny in her arms. The woman was weak from her beating but conscious. The boy looked a little better now that his mother was awake. "Can you walk?" Jake asked Mary gently. "I think so," she replied in a weak voice. Jake helped her stand and supported her weight with one arm. With his other hand, he picked up little Danny. The boy was light as a feather and burning with fever. "This child needs medicine and food," Jake said loudly so everyone could hear. According to the terms of combat, the captain agreed that if I won, the woman goes free and her child gets medical treatment. One of the Zephyrian enforcers stepped forward. "We do not take orders from humans." Jake set Danny down gently and faced the enforcer. "Then you do not honor your captain's word. You do not respect your own laws. You are nothing but bullies with weapons." The enforcer raised his energy rifle, but before he could fire, something unexpected happened. Other humans in the crowd began moving forward. Lisa Brown picked up a stone. Pete Martinez grabbed a piece of broken metal. Janet Smith found a wooden stick. "If you shoot him, you will have to shoot all of us," Lisa said firmly. More humans joined them. Within seconds, dozens of people surrounded Jake and the unconscious Captain Veltar. They were not armed with energy weapons or advanced technology, but they had something the aliens had not seen in 2 years. They had courage. The Zephyrian enforcers looked at each other uncertainly. They could kill Jake easily, but could they kill an entire crowd of angry humans? And if they did, would the other humans in the colony accept it, or would they rebel? For the first time since the invasion began, the aliens were not sure they were in control. The Zephyrian enforcers stood at the edge of the crowd, their weapons raised but their confidence shaken. They had expected to watch their captain easily defeat a primitive human. Instead, they had seen Captain Veltar beaten unconscious by a man using nothing but his hands and mind. "How?" one of the enforcers demanded. "How did you defeat our captain? Humans are weak. Your technology is primitive. You should not be able to fight us." Jake Morrison looked at the alien who had spoken. "That is your problem right there. You think technology makes you strong. You think big weapons and flying ships make you superior. You never learned the most important lesson of warfare. What lesson? The enforcer asked, though he seemed afraid to hear the answer. The strongest weapon in the universe is not a gun or a bomb or an energy beam, Jake said. It is a mind that refuses to give up. It is the will to keep fighting when fighting seems impossible. It is the determination to survive no matter what the cost. Jake reached into his leather shirt and pulled out a small device that none of the aliens recognized. It was roughly made from metal and crystal, with wires that looked like they had been salvaged from various machines. What is that? Another enforcer asked. This is why I am here today, Jake said. This is why I came down from the mountains. This is why I challenged your captain to single combat. He held the device up so everyone could see it clearly. This is a long-range communication beacon. For the past 6 months, I have been broadcasting a signal into space, a signal that carries a very simple message. The crowd, both human and alien, listened in silence. Even Captain Veltar, who was starting to wake up from his defeat, turned his head to hear what Jake was saying. The message says, "This is Jake, Morrison calling from the colony of New Haven on planet Kepler 442b. We are under attack by an alien force called the Zephyrians. They have enslaved our people and are murdering our children. We need help. Please send ships. Please send soldiers. Please remember that humans do not abandon other humans." The Zephyrian enforcers looked at each other with growing alarm. One of them spoke into his communication device, calling for their commanders. "You are lying," the lead enforcer said. "Even if you sent such a message, space is vast. No one would hear it. No one would come." Jake smiled, and this time his expression was full of satisfaction. "You really do not understand humans at all. Let me tell you a story about what happened 300 years ago on Earth." Jake sat down on the stone steps near the whipping post, still holding his communication device. Mary Collins leaned against him for support while little Danny rested in her lap. "There was a ship called the Titanic," Jake began. "It was the biggest, most advanced ship humans had ever built. The people who made it said it could never sink, but one night it hit an ice mountain in the ocean and began going down." The crowd listened carefully. Even the aliens seemed interested in Jake's story. The ship sent out a distress signal using the best technology they had at the time. It was just dots and dashes transmitted by radio waves, very primitive compared to what we have now. But you know what happened? Jake looked around at all the faces watching him. Every ship within 100 miles turned around and raced toward the sinking vessel. Ships that were carrying cargo changed course. Ships that were on important business stopped what they were doing. Ships that barely had enough fuel to reach their own destinations used what they had to try to save strangers. He stood up again, his voice growing stronger. They did not do this because they expected rewards. They did not do this because they were ordered to. They did this because when humans hear a cry for help, they answer. It is who we are. One of the Zephyrian enforcers was speaking urgently into his communication device. Jake could see panic in the aliens' movements. "Your people have conquered many worlds," Jake continued. "You always choose targets that are isolated and weak, planets that have no friends, no allies, no one to call for help. But you made a mistake when you attacked a human colony." Jake activated his communication beacon. It began broadcasting a steady signal that could be detected by any ship with the right equipment. "Humans have been exploring space for over 200 years. We have colonies on dozens of worlds. We have trading partners and military allies across this entire sector of the galaxy. And we have one rule that every human learns from childhood. No one fights alone." The lead enforcer finished his conversation and turned back to Jake with fear in his 4 eyes. "Our orbital sensors are detecting ships," he said quietly. "Many ships. They are still far away, but they are approaching fast." Jake nodded as if this was exactly what he expected. "The first ships to receive my signal were probably cargo vessels and passenger transports. They would have passed the message along to human military bases. The military bases would have contacted Earth Command. Earth Command would have sent battle fleets." He looked directly at Captain Veltar, who was now sitting up but still dazed from his beating. "How many ships did you bring when you invaded our colony?" Captain Veltar did not answer at first. Finally, he spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. 12 ships, 100 soldiers." "I see," Jake said. And how many human worlds do you think received my distress signal? How many human fleets do you think are on their way here right now? Captain Veltar's face went pale beneath his blue skin. This is impossible. Humans do not have that kind of coordination. Your species is too divided. Jake laughed, and for the first time it was a genuinely happy sound. You still do not understand. Humans fight each other all the time. We argue about politics and religion and who makes the best food. We compete in business and sports and art. But when someone from outside threatens any human anywhere, we stop fighting each other and start fighting them. Jake walked closer to Captain Veltar until he was looking down at the defeated alien commander. You attacked New Haven because you thought it was just one small colony with no defenses. What you actually attacked was an outpost of the human race. And the human race is much bigger and much more dangerous than you realized. The enforcer with the communication device was getting more reports from orbit. Captain, he said urgently, command reports that human ships are arriving in the outer system. They estimate at least 50 vessels, possibly more. 50? Captain Veltar struggled to his feet. That is impossible. We monitored human military strength before the invasion. They do not have 50 warships in this entire sector. You monitored military bases and official fleets, Jake said. You did not monitor civilian cargo ships that can be converted to carry weapons. You did not monitor mining vessels that can ram enemy ships. You did not monitor passenger transports that can carry assault troops. And you definitely did not monitor humans like me who have been preparing for war since the day you arrived. Jake held up his communication beacon again. This device has been doing more than calling for help. It has been coordinating resistance, activities across the planet. There are humans hiding in mountains and forests and caves all over this world. They have been building weapons, setting traps, and waiting for the signal to begin fighting back. As if summoned by his words, explosions could be heard in the distance. Smoke began rising from the direction of the Zephyrian military base outside town. The signal has been sent, Jake announced. The revolution has begun, and your 12 ships and 100 soldiers are about to face the combined fury of an entire human world that has been enslaved for 2 years and is very, very angry about it. Captain Veltar looked around the square as if seeing it for the first time. The humans were no longer cowering or looking at the ground. They stood straight and tall with anger and determination in their eyes. Even the children looked ready to fight. What do you want? Captain Veltar asked quietly. Simple, Jake replied. Get off our world. Take your ships and your soldiers and leave. Never come back. And spread the word to every other alien species. In the galaxy, humans are not prey. We are predators, and we protect our own. The explosions in the distance grew louder and more frequent. Smoke clouds rose from multiple directions around New Haven as hidden human resistance cells emerged from their hiding places. For 2 years they had been waiting, planning, and preparing for this moment. Lisa Brown set little Danny Collins down gently and picked up a piece of broken stone from the ground. I am tired of being afraid, she said in a clear voice. I am tired of watching my children go hungry while aliens eat fresh food. I am tired of bowing my head and pretending to be grateful for scraps. Other humans in the crowd began picking up makeshift weapons, rocks, sticks, pieces of metal, anything they could find. They had no energy rifles or advanced technology, but they had something more powerful, 2 years of anger that had been building up inside them. You cannot fight us with stones and sticks, one of the Zephyrian enforcers said, but his voice lacked conviction. We have superior weapons and training. Old Pete Martinez stepped forward holding a metal rod he had pulled from a broken fence. Son, he said to the alien enforcer, you do not understand what you are dealing with. I watched my grandfather die in your mines because you worked him to death. I watched my neighbors starve because you cut their food rations. I watched children get sick because you would not let us trade for medicine. Pete's voice grew stronger with each word. For 2 years I have been quiet and obedient because I was afraid. But today this mountain man showed me something I had forgotten. Sometimes being afraid to die is worse than being afraid to live. More explosions echoed across the town. The Zephyrian communication devices were crackling with panicked reports. From their bases and outposts, human resistance fighters were attacking simultaneously across the entire planet. Jake Morrison listened to the sounds of battle with satisfaction. "Do you hear that?" he asked Captain Veltar. "That is the sound of humans remembering who they are." Captain Veltar was speaking urgently into his own communication device, trying to coordinate a response to the uprising. But the reports he received were all bad news. Base 7 is under attack and requesting reinforcements. Outpost 12 has gone silent. The mining complex reports that human workers have seized the machinery and are using it as weapons. "How many resistance fighters are there?" the lead enforcer asked Jake. "Every human on this planet," Jake replied simply. Some of them just did not know it yet. A new sound could be heard above the explosions, the whine of aircraft engines. 3 Zephyrian flying vehicles appeared over the town square, their weapons charged and ready to fire at the crowd below. "Surrender immediately," a voice boomed from the aircraft speakers. "Return to your homes and workstations or we will open fire on the entire square." Jake looked up at the flying vehicles without fear. "You could kill everyone here," he agreed. "But then what? Kill every human in town? Kill every human on the planet? Who would work your mines? Who would grow your food? Who would maintain your equipment?" He spread his arms wide, addressing not just the aircraft, but all the Zephyrians, watching. "You need us alive to make your occupation profitable, but we do not need you alive at all." Jake reached into his clothing and pulled out another device. This one was larger than his communication beacon and had several blinking lights on its surface. "What is that?" Captain Veltar demanded. "Remember how I told you I studied your technology?" Jake said. "I learned some very interesting things about Zephyrian power systems. For example, all your vehicles and weapons use the same basic energy frequency, and that frequency can be disrupted if you know the right way to do it." Jake's finger hovered over a button on the device. "This is an electromagnetic pulse bomb, much more powerful than the little one I used on your shield. If I activate this, every piece of Zephyrian technology within 5 miles will stop working. Your aircraft will fall out of the sky. Your weapons will become useless metal. Your communication systems will go dead." The aircraft pilots must have heard Jake's words because the flying vehicles began backing away from the square. But Jake was not finished talking. "Of course, setting off an electromagnetic pulse this powerful will also destroy every piece of human technology in the area," Jake continued. "Our lights will go out. Our machines will stop working. Our computers will be wiped clean." He looked around at the crowd of humans surrounding him. "Are you willing to go back to living like our ancestors did? No electric lights, no powered vehicles, no modern conveniences? Are you willing to give up technology in order to be free?" "Yes," Lisa Brown said immediately. "Yes," Pete Martinez agreed. "Yes," called out voice after voice from the crowd. Janet Smith raised her hand high in the air. "My great-grandmother lived without electricity and she was the strongest woman I ever knew. If she could do it, so can we." Jake nodded with approval. "Then we have something your people do not have. We can survive and be happy without advanced technology. You cannot. Take away your machines and you are helpless." Captain Veltar stared at Jake with a new understanding. "You are not just fighting to drive us away. You are fighting to show us that humans cannot be conquered." "Now you are beginning to understand," Jake said. "Every species you have conquered before was dependent on their technology. When you destroyed their machines, they could not fight back. But humans know how to make fire with sticks and stones. We know how to hunt with spears and arrows. We know how to build shelters from mud and grass." Jake activated his device. Immediately, every piece of Zephyrian technology in the area stopped working. The aircraft fell silent and began dropping toward the ground. Their pilots barely managed to crash land in the fields outside town without exploding. The energy weapons carried by the enforcers went dead. Their communication devices stopped crackling. Even their uniforms, which had built-in cooling systems, became uncomfortably hot in the afternoon sun. But the humans barely noticed the loss of technology. They had been living like primitives for 2 years anyway, forbidden from using anything more advanced than basic tools. Now we fight on equal terms, Jake announced. No energy weapons, no aircraft support, no communication with your bases. Just alien muscle against human determination. The Zephyrian enforcers looked around nervously. Without their technological advantages, they were just tall, blue-skinned creatures facing an angry mob of humans who outnumbered them 10-1. We surrender, Captain Veltar said quietly. What? The lead enforcer stared at his captain in shock. We surrender, Captain, Veltar repeated more loudly. We cannot win this fight. This human has taken away all our advantages and shown us that his people cannot be broken. Jake walked over to Captain Veltar and looked him in the eyes. Surrender is a good start, but it is not enough. You need to leave our world and never come back. The other ships in orbit, Captain Veltar said. They will try to re-establish control. They will bomb the human settlements from space. Let them try, Jake said with confidence. Remember those 50 human ships that are coming? They should be arriving in orbit right about now. As if summoned by his words, new sounds could be heard from overhead. The deep rumble of large spacecraft engines filled the air. Shapes began appearing in the sky as ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel. But these were not Zephyrian vessels. These were human ships, and they were much bigger than anything the aliens had brought to this world. Earth Command battleship. Defiance requesting landing coordinates. A human voice called out from speakers that had somehow survived the electromagnetic pulse. Colonel Sarah Thompson commanding. We received your distress signal, Jake Morrison. Sorry we are late to the party. Jake smiled and activated a backup communication device he had kept shielded from the pulse. Better late than never, Colonel. We have the situation under control down here, but we could use some help processing prisoners and evacuating alien personnel. Copy that, Jake. We have transport standing by. Also, Earth Command wants to talk to you about joining the Colonial Defense Corps. Apparently your guerrilla warfare techniques have impressed some important people. Jake looked around the square at the humans who had found their courage and the aliens who had lost their confidence. Tell Earth Command I will consider it. But first, we have a colony to rebuild. Captain Veltar stepped forward. What happens to us now? You will be taken to a human military base for questioning, Jake replied. If you cooperate and provide information about other Zephyrian operations, you might be allowed to return to your homeworld. If you resist or try to escape, you will spend the rest of your lives in prison. The defeated captain nodded slowly. And the other Zephyrians on this planet? Same deal. Surrender peacefully and cooperate, or face the consequences. But let me make one thing very clear. Jake's voice became hard as steel. If any Zephyrian ship ever comes to a human world again with hostile intentions, the response will not be one colony defending itself. It will be the entire human fleet hunting your people across the galaxy until every last one of your ships is destroyed. Captain Veltar looked around at the faces of the humans in the square. 2 hours ago they had been scared, defeated slaves. Now they stood like warriors who had remembered their strength. I understand, he said quietly. We will spread the word. Humans are not to be conquered. Good, Jake said. Now you are learning. 6 months later, the town square of New Haven looked completely different. The whipping post had been torn down and replaced with a memorial to the humans who died during the occupation. Children played where Captain Veltar had once tortured Mary Collins. Gardens grew where Zephyrian enforcers had once stood guard. Mary Collins sat on a bench watching her son Danny chase butterflies with other children. The boy had recovered completely from his illness once proper food and medicine became available again. His cheeks were round and pink and his laughter filled the air. Hard to believe it has only been 6 months, said Lisa Brown as she joined Mary on the bench. Lisa's own children were playing nearby, no longer thin and afraid. Sometimes it feels like a lifetime, Mary agreed. Sometimes it feels like yesterday. The two women watched Jake Morrison working with a group of young men and women near the center of the square. He was teaching them wilderness survival skills, showing them how to make weapons from simple materials and how to move silently through forests. These were volunteers for the Colonial Defense Corps, humans who wanted to make sure no world ever suffered the way New Haven had suffered. He saved us all, Lisa said quietly. We saved ourselves, Mary corrected. He just reminded us how. Jake finished his lesson and walked over to where the women were sitting. He still wore leather clothing and carried handmade tools, but now he also wore the insignia of a Colonial Defense Corps instructor. Earth Command had indeed offered him a position, and he had accepted on the condition that he could train fighters in guerrilla warfare techniques. "How are you feeling today, Mary?" Jake asked as he sat down beside them. "Strong," Mary replied. "Stronger than I have felt in years." Jake nodded with approval. "And Danny? Growing like a weed and eating everything in sight," Mary said with a smile. "I think he is making up for all the meals he missed." They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the children play. The scene was peaceful, but none of them would ever forget the lessons they had learned during the dark years of occupation. "Have you heard any news about the Zephyrians?" Lisa asked. Jake pulled out a communication device that looked much more advanced than the simple beacon he had used during the uprising. Captain Veltar kept his word. The Zephyrian government has officially declared all human worlds off-limits to their military forces. They have also agreed to pay reparations to colonies that were attacked. "And the other aliens?" Mary asked. "The ones who were thinking about attacking human settlements?" "Funny thing about that," Jake said with a grin. "It seems that news of what happened here has spread throughout this part of the galaxy. Several alien species that were planning aggressive actions against human colonies have suddenly decided that peaceful trade agreements are much more attractive." Jake stood up and pointed toward the sky. "Do you see that ship up there?" The women looked up and saw a small vessel moving slowly across the blue sky. It was clearly alien in design, with smooth curves and no visible engines. "Zephyrian?" Lisa asked nervously. "No," Jake said. "That is a diplomatic ship from the Altarian Republic. They want to establish formal trade relations with Earth. Apparently, they have decided that humans would make better business partners than enemies." Mary shook her head in amazement. "2 years ago, we were hiding in our houses, afraid to speak up when aliens abused us. Now, other aliens are coming here to ask for our friendship." "Word travels fast in space," Jake explained. "Everyone knows what happened on New Haven. They know that humans fought back against impossible odds and won. They know that when you attack one human world, you get the attention of all human worlds." Jake's communication device beeped with an incoming message. He read it quickly and his expression became serious. "What is it?" Mary asked. "Long-range patrol ships have detected an unknown fleet moving toward the Proxima system," Jake said. 3 human colonies and about 50,000 people. "Another invasion?" Lisa asked with alarm. "Possibly. Earth Command wants me to take a team of specialists to Proxima and assess the situation." Jake looked at the peaceful square around them. "I hate to leave, but this is exactly why the Colonial Defense Corps was created." Mary stood up and placed a hand on Jake's shoulder. "You have to go. Other people need the same help you gave us." "We'll be fine here," Lisa added. "You taught us how to take care of ourselves." Jake smiled and nodded. "You are right. New Haven does not need me anymore. You have your own strength now." He walked over to where his students were practicing combat techniques. "Listen up, everyone. I just received new orders from Earth Command. We are deploying to the Proxima system within the hour." The young men and women gathered around him with eager faces. These were humans who had lived through the occupation and knew what it meant to be helpless. They would never allow themselves, or anyone else, to be helpless again. "What is the situation, instructor?" asked a young woman named Carol Davis. She had been only 16 when the Zephyrians invaded, but the experience had turned her into a fierce fighter. "Unknown alien fleet approaching 3 human colonies," Jake replied. "We do not know their intentions yet, but we are not taking any chances." "How many ships?" asked Tom Wilson, a former miner whose family had died in the tunnels. 27 vessels. Large ones." The students looked at each other with grim determination. 27 ships was a much bigger force than the 12 vessels. The Zephyrians had brought to New Haven. "What are our orders?" Carol asked. "Same as always," Jake said. "Assess, adapt, survive, and win. If these aliens are peaceful, we will welcome them as friends. If they are hostile, we will teach them the same lesson we taught the Zephyrians. Jake looked around the square one last time. Mary Collins was pushing Danny on a swing while other children waited their turn. Lisa Brown was helping her daughter plant flowers in the memorial garden. Pete Martinez was teaching a group of teenagers how to repair farming equipment. Janet Smith was reading a story to children under the shade of a tree. It was a scene of normal, peaceful life. The kind of life that humans deserve to live without fear of alien invasion or oppression. Remember, Jake said to his students, we do not fight because we love war. We fight because we love peace. We do not fight because we hate aliens. We fight because we love humans. The students nodded, understanding. They had all learned the difference between fighting for conquest and fighting for freedom. As Jake and his team prepared to leave for the spaceport, Mary Collins called out to him. Jake, wait. She walked over and handed him something small, wrapped in cloth. For luck, she said. Jake unwrapped the cloth and found a simple metal pendant shaped like a star. It was made from melted down pieces of Zephyrian weapons that had been destroyed during the uprising. Thank you, Jake said as he hung the pendant around his neck. I will carry it proudly. Come back safe, Mary said. New Haven will always be your home. Jake nodded and joined his students as they walked toward the transport that would take them to their ship. As they left the square, Danny Collins broke away from the other children and ran after them. Mr. Jake, the boy called out. When I grow up, can I join the Colonial Defense Corps too? Jake knelt down and looked Danny in the eyes. When you grow up, son, I hope the Colonial Defense Corps will not be needed anymore. I hope all the aliens in the galaxy will have learned to respect humans and leave us in peace. But if they have not learned? Danny asked. Jake smiled and ruffled the boy's hair. Then yes, you can join. And I will personally teach you everything I know about protecting human freedom. Danny grinned and ran back to his mother. Jake stood up and continued walking toward the transport. Behind him, the town of New Haven continued its daily life. People worked and played and laughed and loved, secure in the knowledge that they would never again bow down to alien oppression. They had learned that humans could be beaten down temporarily, but never permanently defeated. Across the galaxy, other alien species were learning the same lesson. The conquest of New Haven had lasted 2 years. The liberation had taken 1 day. The message had traveled to every corner of known space. Humans are not prey. They are predators, and they protect their own. As Jake's transport lifted off toward the stars, Mary Collins held her son close and watched until the ship disappeared into the blue sky. She thought about how much had changed since that terrible day when she had been whipped for begging bread for her child. That day had seemed like the end of hope. Instead, it had been the beginning of a new chapter in human history. A chapter written in courage and determination, and the unbreakable spirit of people who refused to surrender their freedom. The Mountain Man had surprised the whole town that day, but in the end, the biggest surprise had been learning what humans could accomplish when they remembered who they truly were.